Mark Wales, we are here to talk about your new book. How are you feeling? First of all, big picture, new book coming out. Give me the lowdown.
I was just saying before we started, I've been looking at it and thinking about it for so long. It's just turned into one big morass of just, I don't really know what it is anymore, but now I'm getting feedback from people. So I'm pretty excited. There's still a ways to go before it's out, which I'm glad, because if you actually want to do a decent launch, you kind of got to spend a bit of time seeding it and talking about it and getting it ready for the market. So, mate, I'm pumped. First time I've done it. So,
congratulations. I couldn't put it down. I'm not just saying that. It was like the word I keep thinking about when I was reading was propulsive.
Great.
Like I felt like I was just being pushed through this book.
Awesome.
Against like my kids pulling me left, right, and center. I've got work to do, and I'm just like, no, but I need to know what happens in the next chapter. It was propulsive. So well done. You've somehow managed to distill that. Well done.
Thanks, mate. And I certainly had some help. I think we did 7 full edits on it. So just like taking out the boring bits just takes a lot of time.
Can you give us just the elevator pitch? So just a quick summary for people who want to know, what's the book about?
So in the year 2034, Australia collapses as a viable state. A father and his son are left trying to escape war-torn Victoria. And this is about father and a son trying to find a road to hope.
Pretty good summary. Can we talk about, let's go back a little bit. You've had a very storied career. You've done lots. You've been, SAS, fashion designer, business school, Survivor champ. When did author crystallize in your mind that was something? Because this is your second book. So you've published Survivor, Life in the SAS.
Yep.
When did that happen? When did you want to do that?
So I thought about it when I was in the army. I was like, I need to write about this one day, and I wasn't sure when I was going to do it. It's also hard to write about that stuff from a special ops perspective because people don't love it. But after I'd left Survivor the first time, so it was 2017, I've been out of the army like 4 or 5 years. I came home when I was recovering from Samoa, which takes a bit of time to recover from the jungle.
Tell me about it.
I remember I read Stephen King's On Writing, and I was like, this is such a good book. Yeah, it's such a good book, an inspiring book about the life of a writer and how he became one and some of the trials he went through. So I was like, I've got to get started on this. I ended up doing a podcast with Alex Lloyd, who's a publisher at Pan Macmillan. This is after Survivor. And I spoke to him a lot about his job and how much he has been working in books, and he's a young, up-and-coming kind of editor at Pan Macmillan. And I was like, dude, I've been thinking about writing this book on Afghanistan. He's like, write to me anytime you like. And that's kind of how it started. I reached out to him, got an idea. He goes, write a proposal. I pulled a proposal together. Good top tip for aspiring authors. If you want to write a book, do a proposal first, submit it to publishers if you want to publish. And that's kind of how I got started with it. And then it took me probably 2 years start to finish to kind of get that done. And that came out like 2020.
And when did you get the idea for this book? Because they're very different, although I was saying to you before that I feel like they're like companion pieces. So having read them together myself, I feel like they work so beautifully, but they are different. So when did the idea come for this one?
So 2 years after I'd released the other book, I was talking to Alex again, and he's like, mate, another book? He goes, come on. And I'm like, right, I've got 2 ideas. I had this idea for a non-fiction book and had an idea for a fiction book. And I talked about the non-fiction one, and I was like, oh, it's this kind of stupid leadership book I'm thinking about writing. And I just hated it. I knew the moment I started talking about it, I hated it. And then he goes, yeah, okay. He goes, tell me about the fiction one. And then when I talked about this story, which is about the nightmare of warfighting, which I saw overseas, and just how difficult and horrendous it was. Imagine that nightmare coming home to Australia. And what would you do? How would you cope with it? Your family would be involved in it. What would you do? And that's what it's about.
Yeah, it definitely made me think of those questions.
No, that's what it's. And all the things that happen. So a foreign adversary coming to Australia.
Yeah.
Fomenting civil war, supporting one side over the other. We've done all those things as a country to other countries.
Well, that's what's so shocking about it, because you think, oh, how would I behave in this situation? Would I be the Harry? Would I be the Jack? And then it's like, but why should this feel so foreign to us when this is happening every day around the world elsewhere? So it's very clever how you've brought that home in such an immediate way.
Yeah, it's in some ways it's holding a mirror up to our country and saying, look, we've done this. Yep. It's extremely serious.
Yeah.
And when it comes to our country, this is what it could look like. So it's not a small deal when you go to another country and use force.
Yeah.
And that's the point I was trying to make. But it's about families too. It's about that bond between a parent and child.
I want to put a pin in that and just go back to the writing of the novel, because I'm endlessly fascinated about the process that people go through. and it was really fun following along on your journey. You would post a little bit on Instagram here and there. Can you tell me a little bit about what you learned writing the first book that you then applied to this book? Or was it throw the whole thing out and start again with a fresh new tactic?
So I took some of the things that worked with nonfiction worked again, and some really didn't work. So last time I did it, I had a delivery date for the manuscript. I kind of reverse engineered it on an Excel spreadsheet, and I put my daily word count up. If I'm writing 6 days a week, I think it was 1,000 words a day for about 4 or 5 months.
That's a big call.
It's a big haul, but doable in those little chunks, right?
Yeah.
And if you've got your plan, you can at least work off it and adjust it as you go. When I did the fiction one, I outlined the book, and then I realized you just don't, because you're creating the world as you go along too, the outline doesn't really work and the timeline doesn't really work. but as my editor told me, and I knew better, but no, he was right.
It's funny, yeah. It's funny
that. So that was a good learning curve there. But I found out with fiction, a lot of the writing happens when you're not writing. Or I'll say that again. A lot of the world building and scene building is happening when you're not writing. So you got to think about it. And then I'd sit down and kind of put that half of a scene in place, scene maybe 1,500 to 2,000 words. I'd kind of do half a scene every time I wrote. Or I'd try and write the full scene and then I'd revise it later. So that's kind of how I went along with that. But it was a very different experience. It was much harder. It was much harder.
Okay.
And I found myself having to invent characters that were pretty close to real life people, because I just kept getting confused about who was who.
What advice would you give to aspiring novelists? So I'm also trying to grapple with a manuscript at the moment. What's like the top tip that you would give someone? You've already mentioned some about, proposals, timelines, if they work or not. What else have you got?
Yeah, I think top tip is with the first manuscript, probably the best analogy I've heard is you just shoveling sand into a sandbox. You're going to make a sandcastle later. Don't worry about the sandcastle right now.
That's a good analogy.
It's a good analogy. And so that's a good way to think about it. It stops you having that perfection kind of mindset, because it's frustrating when it doesn't come out the way you want it to. But at the same time, I think, and I made this mistake twice now, I didn't let it sit and then go back and do a solid self-edit. I think that's important, because before it goes to that first set of eyes, you've got to have something that's at least coherent. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's got to be coherent. So, leave a bit of time for that.
You've had so many different endeavors in your life, and you always throw yourself headfirst into them. That was one of the things that really stands out to me when you read your memoir. Is this now where you find yourself, this author space? What can we imagine for the future?
Mate, it shocked me how lonely an endeavor it was.
Right.
But also how rewarding it was. When you kind of see it come to life, you're like, this is what I imagined.
Okay.
This is how good I thought it could be.
Yeah.
And I think when other people see it, they're going to be like, holy shit. Like, is this a world that exists like anywhere? But I saw flashes of it overseas, and it never left me. I always wanted to write more about it at home.
Okay, so we can imagine you in this space moving forward. Give the people what they want, Mark.
Mate, I reckon there's a multi book. I've got a book 2 story outlined.
Okay, so that was exactly my next question. Yes. When there's no spoilers here, but when I put the book down, I straight away wondered, what's next? film, TV show, book 2, like if you're in an ideal world, what would you want to happen next? Or are you not even trying to not to think about it too much?
So I think when it comes to, and I've only had a bit of exposure to this, but when producers and filmmakers see things like this, they'll take an interest. If they've really got to resonate with it and they come to you and it's a whole nother project, whole other contract, everything else. Yeah. So I'm not writing for that or worrying about that because it sometimes just won't. Like Matthew Rye is a great example. Really successful author, written heaps, but hasn't had a lot of films made. And I think that's okay. He's done great books. So I think I'll concentrate on building out that world.
Yeah.
And the next one will be set in West Australia.
Okay.
And I'll have very similar characters.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to see it. I want to get now more into the actual book itself. There was a quote in the book where Jack says that he felt as if he had been thrown into a fast-moving river. And that is the feeling of reading this book. I felt like I too was in that river and it was going and I was along for the ride. How do you capture that? How do you convey that in the writing? How do you convey that in the storyline? Is that what you were aiming for? Because you achieved it, if so.
Yeah, I think when I do some homework on fiction writing, one thing I do is I sit down and go onto the masterclass platform and I watch the James Patterson one and the David Baldacci one.
Okay.
And you get 3.5 hours face to face with this top author.
Amazing. Yeah.
Just giving their top tips. And they're like, the pacing's got to be right. Mm-hmm. It's got to move. Can't be boring. It's got to be conflict. The protagonist has to get punished. Like they've got to take on a lot of punishment.
Jack gets punished.
They've got to get hurt.
You took that one and really ran with that one, Mark.
And so there's all these little tips they give around readability. But I think the convention of and the major pieces of stories need to be in place. And this is what I didn't realize when I first started my first book is there are conventions around storytelling that you'll see in any good story. The inciting incident, dark night of the soul, the inflection point, the walk home. All these things are all part of a good book. And I think it really pays to get to know those. And the one book I read that taught me most about those was Stephen Pressfield, Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit.
Great title.
It's a really short book. I read it. You can read it in a few hour or two, really, a couple of hours. But he talks about these conventions in a really concise way.
You mentioned world building before. You build a very vivid world of what Australia would look like in this situation. And one of the things I loved is that map from the beginning at the beginning of the book, which really does lay out a pretty bleak potential landscape and future for Australians. Can you tell me about that world building and how you did it and what decisions you made?
Yeah, part of it is like, well, what precipitates a fall in Australia? And I was like, well, if there was one stat that interested me that I'd read about, they said if there was a major conflict, like a really major conflict in the South China Sea, and Australia couldn't get any import and export going, our economy would revert back to something like the 1960s. It would be like a 1960s economy. So I kind of started with that in mind. Okay. I was like, all right, imagine if you're an adversary, you don't need to control all of Australia. You're just going to control some of the resources and some of the population centres, and that's it. You're going to leave the rest alone. And that's how I structured it. There's two parts of Australia that are taken over. They're joined with rail and air networks, and it's purely used as a war development, raw materials zone. And parts of Australia have aligned themselves with those forces, and the other half are fighting against that force.
Was that fun, that whole map process? Like, did you find that really helped having that visual? Because it certainly helps the reader.
Yeah, it was the editor's idea, because sometimes when I was writing it, I was kind of like, even he goes, well, what parts of Australia are free? What parts are occupied?
Really fascinating.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, we're going to have to figure this out. Like, and then when we sat down and really thought about it, that's how the map kind of took shape.
It's really great to have that at the beginning, and then as you're reading, you're plotting this really intense journey through this hellish landscape. And it's like, wait, that's where I live. Especially this.
It's called Adelaide.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As someone from Adelaide, it was like where South Australia gets quite a mention. Not all great. Not all great, but I've drank at the Sejuna pub. So that was
Mate, Sejuna pub's in there. Yeah, of course.
So let's talk now. You said that, 2029, there's an invasion, Chinese military forces. It felt almost plausible. Could this happen?
Oh, it's extremely remote. It's extremely remote, but as a mechanism for the storytelling, like, I think it works. Even if it's remote, it's like,
yeah,
all right, if there's nothing stopping anyone from coming here, what might happen?
Well, I guess the follow-up question is, if it does happen, will you protect me? Because I feel like I need you.
Mate, I think I'll be negotiating a 3-bedroom penthouse somewhere in the city.
Oh God. All right. So one of the things that really struck me, is the reference to AI and augmented reality, and the modern technology of modern warfare, which as a layperson I didn't know was happening, or I didn't know was on the horizon. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Is this where we're at? Was this part of your speculative fiction, and where you were kind of speculating where we're going? Or is this something that, readers would be shocked to know there is the genesis of it and what's happening? We've got cybernetic motors, which are building people limbs remotely from Boston.
Yes.
We've got weather machines, which are being used in targeting in battle.
Yeah.
There's robots. It's insane.
So I've always had an interest in kind of bleeding edge technology and the stuff they're working on that is very secret, but it's a long way ahead of where we are. And some of this tech, which I always end up reading about, I've just incorporated it because it's in the near future. I'm like, well, let's make it come to life. And so when it comes to robotics, there's a real interest in that from DARPA, the US Defense Research, and can't remember the acronym, but they're defense research basically. So robotics is a big one. Autonomous warfare, stealth jets, unmanned jets, unmanned submarines. There is a small section on weather manipulation. That's there's probably less. That's more of a dark space where I don't know if that holds up.
But what's great about it is this is not just a book for action readers. This is a book for science fiction readers. This is a book for history buffs.
Yep.
It was a nice little surprise for me that I didn't think I would get in the book, that just kind of came out of left field, and it works.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah, I like thinking, all right, if we were backed by the CIA, and you don't have to look far to see where this is happening right now.
Yeah.
What sort of things would pop up on the battlefield that you just would be shocked by? And you're seeing it in the present day right now on another battlefield.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the themes in the novel. There seems to be almost this kind of, well, you call it the carnival of human torture, this casual attitude to death, and there's a bit of gore in the novel. Can you tell me about where that line is and what you were trying to show readers, particularly maybe someone with your background experience? Why did you think that was important to show people?
I don't think people have any understanding of what happens in combat, and I think that's not a bad thing. I was the same, even though I was a history major at my undergrad, and I'd studied it. I still wasn't prepared when I saw it, and I think we have a tendency to romanticize it, and it's all these modern clinical machines, but the nature of it hasn't changed much. It's a lot of death and destruction, and I think I wanted to kind of have just some bursts of that in there, enough to shock people, really. But also, I wanted to leave some of it off the page and left to people's imagination as well, because that's oftentimes just as effective.
You opened up about PTSD symptoms in your memoir. It was very powerful the way you spoke about it. You make a comment in this book that says seeing people killed could rewire your mind.
Yeah.
you've even said in this book here that there are animal instincts that can be unleashed even in the best men during war.
Yep.
Can you explore that in relation to the novel and why you thought that was important to include?
Yeah, I think it's a dilemma when you're fighting, is that if you succumb to all these animal instincts, there may be nothing to rescue at the end.
Right.
There may be nothing. Even if you survive, you might be so affected by it that the rest of your life is ruined. And I feel like one of the characters in the novel is like that. And he's a warning to a lot of people about, if you take this too far, there's no coming back from it. And it's that I feel like a few times we kind of looked into that abyss in the early days of my deployments when I was over there. It was like, you could lose your humanity here and never come back. You'd never come back from it. Yeah.
In that vein, morality is a big part of the book.
It is. And his dilemma is trying to save and protect his son while having to fight to do that at the same time. Like, how do you balance those two things?
Yeah, and walk that line where there are these two forces pulling you in opposite directions. And that kind of adds to the propulsive nature of the storyline.
Yeah.
What, the quote about morality that really stuck out to me is you said that I think when you're referencing the Cranbourne boys.
Yeah.
Did you want to give a little summary of who they are first?
The Cranbourne boys are a particularly nasty group of Australians that are fighting against the resistance, and they're based on a real guy I know who lives out in Cranbourne.
What did he do to you?
And I told him, I'm like, mate, I'm going to turn you into a villain, and he loved it. He's a plumber, so I made the leader of the Cranbourne boys an ex-plumber, and
it's awesome. Well, at one point, to go back to morality, you said that they were overpaid, over-equipped, and under-moralized. That stuck with me quite a lot. What comment were you trying to make there about the idea around morality?
A similar note to, if you're overcommitted to a particular cause and you're in it for too long, you can be radicalized by it.
Yeah.
That's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
And these people are radicalized by their own views, that they, like anyone in a war, they think they're the good guys, but in actual fact, they're not very good.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of these characters. So the driving emotional arc of the story is Jack's relationship to his son, who's named Harry. Some real life parallels for yourself there. Did you want to kind of expand on that?
Yeah. So my boy, who's 6 years old, is called Harry. I think the name is quite an innocent name. I think Jack, the protagonist's name, his name's Jack Dunn. That's very much a nod to the genre. And I had this discussion with Alex, the editor. I was like, is this too common a name? Like, we've overdone this. Jack Ryan, Jack, who's Jack
Reacher.
Carr, Jack Reacher. Like, he's like, he thought about it. He's like, no, this tells people what they're going to get out of this story. I'm like, yep, perfect.
He gets it done.
Yep. So to have that action man, and then to have this son who's quite innocent, that's that tension I was trying to set up. And I think that my inspiration for this was The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
That was one of my questions.
I read that when I was in Afghanistan the first time. I wasn't a parent. The second time I read it, I was a parent. And both times it totally rocked me for different reasons.
Yeah. So you dedicate the book to your dad, which was a really nice dedication. Yep. What do you want readers to think about that father-son bond that is such a through line in the text?
Yeah, I think I distinctly remember we're in the middle of this battle in 2007, and I had to park our car next to this huge, like, residential compound. And this Afghan father came out with his son, would have been 5-6 years old, same as Harry's age, and he sat him on his lap, and he sat there watching us fight. There was kind of a pause in the fight, and we were parked near his house, and he was talking to his son about us. I had no idea what he was saying, whether it was good, bad, ugly, whatever. But I remember watching that father talking to his son, and that stuck with me. And then there are other examples in Afghanistan where it wasn't uncommon to have 3 generations fighting at once.
Right.
Grandfather, father, son. And so, yeah, there was this constant link between the generations, like was passed down in some ways. Yeah, so that always stuck with me when I was over there.
It definitely, as a young father myself, it definitely makes you feel very protective over Harry.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was imagining him as your son's face, knowing, your son, but it definitely, it was very easily could have been my own son. And the trials that Jack goes through, it really does hit. It was hitting me right in that little kind of parental nerve.
Yeah.
You've done a great job of summarizing that somehow in such a foreign landscape.
Yeah. But that's the nightmare, isn't it? That all that would come home and there would be nothing you could do to protect your kids from it. It'd just be, it would come, you'd have no choice in it. It would be there.
Yeah.
And you'd be powerless.
Especially as a lowly English teacher here. I'm like,
mate,
I don't know what I'm doing in an apocalypse.
We can turn you into a good soldier. Don't worry about that.
That's funny. To what extent are you Jack Dunn?
I thought about this. I'm like, I can't make myself like this guy because you've got to have him distinctly separate. I think he's similar in a lot of ways in that his experiences and background and upbringing was similar to me. So when I talk about some of the deployments he did, they were similar. I started his earliest deployments in 2021 into the emergency evacuation of Kabul, which is where he meets his wife.
Yeah.
That was me, but maybe 10, 15 years earlier.
Okay.
So I've kind of totally shifted the timeline, but yeah, similar in some ways for sure.
How are you different to Jack?
Well, he's a lot tougher. He's had to do all this. He's everything I wish I could have been. He's done all this, and
it's like writing your fantasy of who I wish I could be.
Yeah. So, I mean, but to survive what they go through, you'd have no choice because you're at home anyway.
Yeah.
So I think, I like him. I think he's a good character. I think there's a fair few layers to him. And he's doing the best he can in a terrible situation.
Well, he's very complex.
Yeah.
And what I really resonated with was him saying things like that, that he was losing his edge.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where it said that the callous shell that had protected him was starting to break down.
Yep.
Have you ever grappled with that? Is that anything that where did you draw that from? That idea of like who you need to be is almost breaking down or disintegrating when you need it the most?
So that came from me imagining being a soldier at my age now versus when I was young.
Right.
So you would have certain advantages, like you'd be more mature, you'd have more emotional intelligence, a bit more wisdom. But at the same time, some of those hard skills would go, you'd have a certain softness or potential trusting nature that you can't have on a battlefield.
That's actually, I've never thought about that before.
Be totally different experience.
You need almost that kind of cavalier nature of youth to kind of push you to where you wouldn't go now.
Yeah. And also the physical ability to handle that sort of punishment.
Yeah.
Like the injuries and the backing up day in and day out. Like that changes as you get older. So those challenges for him, I think I kind of took that from Skyfall. Yeah, how there's the theme in there, Bond getting older.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of from that.
Okay, that's good. Something to keep pulling on in a future book, I reckon. Jack Dunn in a little mobility scooter cruising across the Nullarbor. Yeah. Putting Jack aside, you do write female characters really well in the text because there are some absolute kick-ass female characters. Jess is someone who really springs to mind for me. What were you hoping to present to readers there?
So with Jess, I wanted to have an arc where initially she presents as a bit of a hack and a stereotype and kind of almost, I don't know if it's a trope of like someone who's a bit hapless on the battlefield, but she's not that at all. She's just in an uncomfortable situation initially and she just gets better and better and better as she goes along. And not only that, she also becomes almost an emotional wall for the child as well. She looks after him to some extent as well. So I think showing those different sides of her was good fun. And also the tension between Jack's experience with American intelligence officers in the past and him being distrusting of them. I kind of try and bring that to light as well.
Other than them, there is a whole cast of crazy characters. And I say crazy lovingly because they are these really well-rendered, unique people. And I assumed that they were inspired by people that you've kind of picked up along the way. Did you want to admit to anyone now, other than your plumber friend, did you want to admit to anyone that you have rendered them in as a crazy side character?
There are a lot of people in the book that when mates of mine read it, they'll be like, I know who this is straight away, down to what they wear, how they talk,
right.
The weapons they carry.
You say, no, it's fiction, man. It's fiction.
It's fiction. It's fiction. What, there are 4 lawsuits now? So yeah, it's but it was also a case of I kind of ran out of a bit of horsepower. I'm like, actually, the characters that really stood out to me in the military, I can kind of modify them and still have them be fun characters as well.
We know each other through Survivor. Anyone from Survivor or any of your Survivor experiences make its way into some of these characters, because God knows that beach is full of deranged people, us included.
Yeah, there's a few threads of Luke Toki in one of the characters. You can
Cranbourne
see
boy, yeah.
just this Rockingham terror, straight out of Southwest Australia, just there to cause trouble.
That's funny. That's funny. One of there was a line that really stood out to me. So Head says to Jack early on in the novel that Jack is the main effort of the mission.
Yep. And
Jack's response when he finds out that it's been built around him is, hell yes, I am. Now, how do you convey that mixture of trepidation, but also that excitement to get out there? Because that seems to be like almost like a connection to your other text, that there is this something inside soldiers or people in this situation that you have to be comfortable with both things being true. Is that part of your experience?
That's a really good point. And it's funny because when I was writing, I didn't even think of that.
Oh, well, there you go.
But it's more, it's kind of the shit talking you do when you're in the military, that you all of a sudden, you've got the entire weight of an operation resting on your shoulders. But at the same time, people acting cavalier about it because your mate's going to be saying, don't screw it up. You're useless. Why is this happening to you? So it's just a bit of, it was kind of that fun response that someone has, a bit of false bravado, but secretly they'd be quite nervous about it.
Yeah. It is a funny book. Like there are parts of it where there was like the banter between, it felt really drawn upon from like your own experiences. Was it important that you injected that humor in there?
Yeah, because there's no relief. If it's too much, if you're getting pulled along too much and there's no pauses, that's hard. And also, it's just a more realistic depiction of war fighting. There are funny bits, and that's what you live for. They're the good times,
the things that keep you going.
Yeah,
maybe the things that keep you going through writing a book as well, right?
Correct. A lot of tears.
What's your favorite scene? What's the thing that when you think back to the writing of the book, what's the bit that really stands out to you?
It's funny because the scenes that I liked writing, not everyone latches onto, but the ones that I kind of thought were passé are the ones people have really remembered. But I think the one I remember is I was standing at Lilydale Lake with Harry a while back, and I was like, imagine if this joint was taken over, like the train line would run supplies and people out of Lilydale out to, God knows where, to some industrial area. And that's when I came up with the idea of this train that would be moving people out of these occupied areas into basically slave labour.
Yeah.
And so that scene
in South Australia.
Into South Australia. Wine country. And
wine with a H.
So that's where I came up with that scene. I thought that was quite a dark bit, but I liked it.
You mentioned Lilydale. The book is set in the hill is what you call it. it's almost like a little bit of a love letter to where you're from in some ways. Can you talk to me about why you wanted to do that, and why was that what you were aiming to do?
Yeah, Sam will laugh, my wife, because I complain about it all the time because it's so cold up there. But the area we're from is called the Mount Dandenong Ranges. It's about 30 or 40 k's east of Melbourne. It's this long kind of ridgeback mountain. It's about 600 meters high, really thickly vegetated, huge. It's got like some of the tallest eucalypts in the country on this hill. And when I was up there, I was like, this would be such a great place to defend. Like, the thought just came to my mind once. I was like, wow, imagine if you actually had to form a community and defend this place. How would you do it? So that was kind of the premise of the book. This parts of Australia have fallen, but there are resistance holdouts.
Yeah.
Much like when we first went to Afghanistan, there was Tora Bora, which was mountainous, easy to defend. And to get in there was really tough. So this hill is no different. There's a huge resistance faction up there. They've been left alone for a while by occupation forces because they haven't intervened too much in what's been happening. But Jack Dunn inadvertently reignites that war, and that whole hill community is now in jeopardy of being cleared out militarily. And the areas in there are real places. The pub that's up there is called the Pig and Whistle. There's a few scenes there. That's a real place. The family that runs it, real people. The Five Ways is a 5 ways intersection on the top of the ridgeline where there's a cafe and a lookout. That's a real place. There's a roundabout. Yeah, there's a roundabout at the bottom of the hill where Harry used to go to daycare.
Okay.
And that's where I put the very first scene that involves involves a bit of combat. So they're all real places, and I think the locals that are there will know it.
They'll get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
You talked about at the beginning of the book how there's this scene, but one of the other things about the beginning of the book is that it starts with the loss of Jack's partner, Gemma. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so the first scene, I actually went back and did this after the first manuscript because I had this like, all right, this needs to open with something that tells you this is a very different world to what we're living in now. And so set up on the hill, everyone's dressed terribly. It's cold. They're burying someone who's kind of revered. It's a female. It's Jack's wife. You find out he's with his son. They cremate her on a pyre, which is not really a traditional Australian.
No, it felt like this Viking
method of burial. Yeah. So, and during the cremation, a F-35 with some unpiloted drones flies overhead, and so it tells you it's a very different world to what we're living in now. I got the idea for the pyre from being in Nepal with Sam, and I stood at the riverbanks in Nepal and watched a family kind of clean one of their loved ones. Yeah, getting ready for cremation. Yeah, and that's where that it was so moving, and that's where that first scene kind of came from.
Yeah, right. Boy, that's a powerful image.
Yeah, I just thought it was such a. You don't see that in Australia, so it just tells you maybe this is a different time or a different scenario entirely.
And that experience with Gemma does kind of resonate like throughout the whole text.
Yes, yeah, he's lost his wife, he's coming to terms with it, and he's trying to survive.
And Harry's lost his mother. And
Harry's lost his mum, so it's a shock for him.
Yeah, right. I hope Sam didn't think that was her. And
she's like, "What? You killed me off?"
I didn't even get to say.
Okay, you're actually in there a lot in flashbacks, so
that's funny. Yeah, you'll get the flashbacks.
There'll be a prequel.
Yeah. Okay, good. One of the characters we haven't mentioned yet is a really fascinating character by the name of Dyson.
Yep.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the origin story of where that character came from?
Yeah. So Dyson is Jack's kind of superior officer, kind of runs the defense, runs the resistance up on the hill. He's senior to him. They served together in the Ukraine as non-uniformed special forces officers. Dyson was severely burned in combat, and you can see it. Right, he's badly disfigured. And he still participates in the defense of the hill, but he's a shattered man compared to what he was. And there's still that tension between him and Jack from their early days, and maybe a bit of jealousy that Jack's still functioning and can operate as an outrider. And so I put that in there because there's always this interesting tension between troop commanders who went to Afghanistan with their squadron commanders. There was always this push and pull between you and your boss because they had to set the missions. You had to take the risk. Sometimes you shared the risk, but there was always this pull and push between the two. And it'd be quite a hard relationship at times. So I kind of built that in there to highlight that. And also he's a warning about fighting, and what it can look like if it's non-recoverable.
Yeah. Yeah. It was that, the relationship between the two, you could see that there are these little sparks in it that are both positive, but they're shrouded in something like a guilt or a survivor's guilt, or there's something there that it was quite tragic, but also beautiful in a way.
They love each other, but they can't say it. And there's some bad blood as well.
Is that something that you have experienced in your life?
Yeah. Yeah, because when you're in the army, you'd go through all these experiences together, and later on things can happen that you don't agree with, or you separate from one reason or another. It hasn't really happened to me at all, but I've seen it happen between others as well. And it's a pretty interesting dynamic that once upon a time you're unbreakable, and then as life goes on, you revert back to kind of what you were before you were a soldier. And
interesting.
And you're different. Yeah.
Yeah, right. What are you hoping that other veterans or other, people who are connected to the army, what are you hoping that they will take from this novel?
The big one is that all the stuff you've been through, which isn't always useful to you, can be quite hard. You can actually turn into something creative that can both educate and entertain people at the same time. And that's kind of what I tried to do here. Everything that I wanted to talk about maybe in the last book that I couldn't, I've kind of managed to bring it to life here in a different way.
Right.
And it's great. I think I've gotten to bring back to life real people in some cases, and it's an honor.
Do you feel a certain sense of responsibility in writing about something that is so close to not only yours, but people that you fought with or people that you were fighting for? Do you feel a certain responsibility in depicting that information down on the page?
I felt it more in non-fiction.
Okay.
But here, you've also got to get the details right as well, because you want them to see it and be like, yes, all right, he did his homework on this bit, or he depicted that right. Even down to the weapon that he's holding on the cover, and the graphic designer will laugh at this because we went through about 5 or 6 iterations. And
it's a great cover, by the way.
Thanks, mate. I think it's a cracker. That cover evolved over time as well, but Alex and the designer did a great job. So those little details, they kind of matter because they don't pull you out of the story if you know better. And it's not jarring if things are running the way they should in terms of the mechanics or the physics and everything about the story.
It's called Outrider. What is an outrider?
So this came about because I remember going to a lunch once with the commanding officer of SAS, and he goes, we're gonna go, it's gonna be plainclothes lunch, we're gonna meet this important figure in the government, and we're gonna bring in all the other outriders that are out there. And that piqued my interest because I didn't know what it meant. I just listened a bit more, and I figured out that the outriders were this informal network of ex-special forces guys that were out in the community that weren't formally a part of the unit, but were helping, it was still affiliated with the unit.
Right.
And I was like, I just feel like I caught the tip of a small iceberg in just that one comment. I'm like, I bet there's a whole other thing there. And that's where the name came from, is that this guy is an outrider who's been out of the unit for a long time, but he's still very much supporting the resistance.
That's so interesting. And it kind of speaks to that point you were saying before about with fiction, like so much of it is written when you're not actually on the page.
Yeah.
It's the little pieces that you can grab, like a magpie away.
Yep. And it takes, I found that the horsepower, the mental horsepower needed was so much greater because with nonfiction, you're translating something that's already happened. It's just a selection of what parts of it. With this, it's everything. It's trying to build the world, the actions, the dialogue. You've got to see it first before you write it.
In that, did you feel that once you finished the nonfiction, obviously it's your life story, obviously you can never include everything. Was there, it's almost like when you have a conversation with someone and then, you leave and you're like, oh, I came up with the perfect comeback. Did you feel that once you had kind of published that book that you're like, oh, I forgot that? Or, oh, I wish I'd kind of rung that bell a little bit more. Did you have that experience and then did that kind of find its way into this?
So it was the other way around. We put a bit too much in the first book that was probably over the operational security line. So we pulled it back a bit.
Okay.
We massaged it back and I was like, well, there were whole deployments I couldn't even talk about.
Sure.
Which was frustrating. But I remember locking that away and going like, I'll find a way. I'll find a way to do this creatively without talking directly.
So that's the Easter egg, right?
That's
now you get to go and try and find.
All this will be based on, versions of real life.
Yeah, right. There you go. There's a little thing for readers. They can DM you and see if they've got it right. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Who are you hoping picks this book up? Obviously, you want everyone to pick it up. We want it to be a bestseller, but who is your audience? Like when you were writing it, like who were you thinking would connect to this story?
Well, there'd be, say, someone who reads a lot of Jack Reacher or Matthew Riley, and they know there's this world that exists, but they probably haven't seen the bad side of it. I wanted people to see that. I think that's important because people don't understand what we're asking young people to do when we send them overseas to fight.
So true.
They don't understand. And that's a failure in the national debate. It's a failure in storytelling because people come back from it and they don't want to talk about it. And they're not encouraged to talk about it.
Yeah.
If they write about it, they get disowned by their communities. So to me, it was like, if you're uncomfortable with this, then you should have seen what we were doing overseas.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to say.
Did you experience that people disowned you or people pushed back against what you had written in the first book? And are you afraid of it happening for this?
No one that mattered, I don't think. Anyone.
How's that for a burn?
I think people who have a good perspective understand. And I had mates actually that I served with and didn't know that well that like, I picked your book up, I wanted to hate it, and I really enjoyed it.
Look at that.
He goes, yeah, I think that the first time I wrote, I didn't want it to be an expose on the SAS. I want it to be a life story with a war involved in it.
Yeah.
And the SAS is part of it rather than, it's not a new idea expo on the SAS.
Can we pivot to some other topics
Yes.
really quickly? I hear that you have been in a bit of a movie. Anything you can tell us about that?
Yeah, it's I haven't actually shouted this out too much.
What can't you do, Mark?
Oh no, mate! This was a total random one. I actually had to stop writing for a bit to do it.
Right. Okay.
So I auditioned. I'd heard that they were going to make Furiosa in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that they'd been talking about it for a long time.
What's Furiosa for people listening?
For Furiosa is a character in the Mad Max universe. So Mad Max, famous films. The last film was Fury Road, introduced this character, Furiosa, who's a heroine. And they're making her origin story. And they got funding from New South Wales to it. They did it back in Australia. And I heard it was in pre-production. And I had an agent, Kylie Green. I'm like, Kylie, there's only one movie on earth I would ever want to do, and it's this one.
Yeah.
Can you see if you can get an audition for me? And I don't audition. I've auditioned a few times in Survivor and all that, but not a real film audition. I got the audition back and I was like, oh, it's got a monologue and all these from the network and all these like old, like stories about, you tell a story about how you're going to survive if the world collapses. And it was a really cool audition.
I got a story you can tell.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go. Right there.
Tell them that.
You've written that.
And so I auditioned for it. Didn't hear back. And I was like, probably won't hear back. Email came back later. I think it was after I'd been on Survivor.
The second time.
Second time. They're like, hey, director wants to chat. They saw your audition. They liked it. They just want to speak to you. So I spent an hour on the Zoom call with George Miller, the director of Mad Max, and his script writer, Nico Lathoris, who played Grease Rat in the first Mad Max film. And they just talked. They just told stories for hours about, George talked about how he was an emergency doctor and the injuries he saw from car accidents and having to tell families their kids had died in road accidents, like really full-on stuff from the 1970s in Sydney.
Right.
And it was really interesting.
How much would people pay to be part of that Zoom with George Miller?
Mate, it was just, and he's such a curious, open-minded guy. And at the end, he goes, look, this is what the story's about. We've found most of the major characters and we're just filling out the kind of constellation of other characters around them. So we'll find something for you. We're going to come back to you. And I was like, they're not going to. I didn't want to believe it. And my agent's going, they've got a role for you. You better start training. And I was like, no. Sure enough, a role came back. I don't know if I can say it. I'll say it anyway. The character is Hefty Brakeman. He works with a Morton Joe.
Hefty Brakeman.
Mate, so funny. And
I'm changing your name in my phone now to Hefty Brakeman. Just know that.
And he's aligned with one of the major baddies, but he works with Furiosa.
Okay.
In the yards, like helping to build these trucks and whatnot.
So this is a substantial,
Mate, it was bigger than I thought. Because I remember asking someone like, "Is this am I an extra in the background, like holding a toilet brush and chanting?" And the guy's like, "Mate, you're a cast member. There's like 40 people. You're one of the cast members." I was like, "No way!" And so I had to.
Were you shitting?
Oh, mate, I was shitting myself.
Yeah. Okay.
And the first day I got on set was the biggest scene we did, and I was on a crane, and there were motorbikes all around me and 200 people watching. And they go, okay, action. And then you have to perform a certain, mate, it was a lot. It kind of reminded me of the first time you're on the mat on Survivor. Yeah. And you know it's a big deal. And you're kind of like.
And they're all watching the cameras. Dance, monkey dance, yeah.
But the good thing about it is he all of his Mad Max world is a warning about how the world could go if these tyrants get in charge and we all collapse and there's no hope.
There's a lot of crossover,
a lot of crossover. So, huge inspiration. I think it's going to be a cracker film.
That's amazing.
Can't wait.
When can we see it?
Oh, that comes out May 24th.
Wow.
So not far.
That's not far.
Yeah.
Ready to see you up on the big screen.
Let's go.
We've seen you
I had to grow a beard out. It looks horrendous, but yeah, it'll be good.
Can we just talk about some of your other endeavors in life? You mentioned Survivor.
Yeah.
You got the chance to do it twice. You come back and you take out the whole thing. Champion. You win. Have you scratched that itch? Or is it something that is embedded in you, kind of like being a soldier? There's like a little part of you that's always connected. Like, do you feel now that you can put the Survivor chapter to rest? Or is it something that, again, get on the call, yep, I'll be there?
You know what it's like? It's such a fun experience, and the contest of it takes everything. Takes all your physical ability, all your social ability. It's such a hard thing, but it's also so fun. And you talk about it for the rest of your life.
Yep.
So even though I went the whole distance, I think, and I said too, when I was in agony after it, I'm like, I'm not doing that again. But I know if they called, I'd probably be like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Sucker for it.
Well, you're very good. Well, I'm the same. It's funny because you think.
Mate, you're such a fan of it. You'd be there no time.
Well, it's funny because you think you do it once and then you're like, oh, God, thank you. I'm glad I don't want to do that again. And then you get the call and you're like, all right, now I've done it twice. I'm done. Like, thanks. But you never know, right? Like, I feel like we're just like a little bit deranged, And you
never know, like, you might just get the right conditions.
Yeah.
And be able to, kind of like we got perfect conditions in the last one.
Yeah.
And it got us to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good bit of good play, bit of good luck. And
Yeah.
we got to the end.
No, I think I would. I think I'll definitely do it again because it's like I just feel like until I win,
Mate,
I'm going to keep
exactly.
going back. But you won.
Yeah. I know. I'd just be jumping the shark if I went back. But I'm hopeless. I'd probably do it and just get smoked, but it'd be fun still.
That's funny. Do you have a book in you about Survivor, you reckon?
I know a few people have tried it, but I don't know how well it's gone. Have you read any?
I've read some short stories about the life of a ex-reality TV contestant. Yeah.
I think, I don't think there'd be one on just Survivor, but there could be a second memoir at some point.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was a good experience. I'd be willing to do that again later on. Yeah.
We're nearly done. I want to just now do some quick fire questions.
Yeah, I love it.
You ready?
Love it.
So we're going to do a couple of rounds. We're going to do 3 rounds. Each round has its little flavor, but let's just kind of like bang, bang, bang these questions out. Okay, so just quick 5. You ready?
Let's go.
So let's start with a bit of the Outrider quick 5. Okay. Who would win in a fight between you and Jack Dunn?
I'd smash him. I know all his weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly. You can just ride him a little bit weaker for that scene. Yeah. Okay. Question 2. What's your favorite weapon or gadget that's used in the book?
Oh, definitely the automatic grenade launcher.
Right. Who's playing Jack in the movie version? If you got the call from George Miller saying we're going to make a movie, who do you want to be Jack Dunn apart from yourself? Because we know you're an actor now.
Can't be the guy from Jack Reacher either. Ryan Gosling.
Wow.
Unconventional.
Ken.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ken, Army Ken. I like it. I can see it.
That'll work.
Yeah, great.
He surprised me in Blade Runner.
Yeah.
I didn't think he pulled that off.
That was good.
like, that was good.
All right. Well, Ryan, if you're listening, we've got to pick up the call.
Who did you see when you were reading it?
I just could only see you. I found it really hard.
I'll train up.
I found it really hard to not see you, just knowing you. But I think Ryan Gosling is a good one. Yeah,
could have Hemsworth,
Hugh Jackman, maybe.
Hugh Jackman. Yeah, actually, that's not bad.
Yeah,
he's
got the Australian thing.
A bit older, got the Wolverine thing going.
Yeah, that maturity.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, all right. If there is a movie, can I please play that crazy crackhead character with the wheelbarrow full of possum skins?
Oh, yes. Yes, you can. He'd be perfect.
So that's me. I'm that guy.
Toothless.
Toothless. Yeah, the toothless. So, question 5. There is a robot named Mrs. Rabbit.
Oh, yeah.
When you were writing it, were you aware that it sounded suspiciously like a vibrator?
Oh, I did not, but I like that. Hey, she's going to come back.
Okay.
All her memories are uploaded to the cloud. She'll be back in the next book.
Love it. Very good. Let's pivot now to the writing quick 5. Okay. So 5 questions about writing the quick 5. Ready? Number 1. Was the book always named Outrider?
Yes.
No,
it was named Victoria 2034 at one point.
Okay.
And then we changed it.
Okay. Why'd you change it?
Alex came up with the names better.
Very good. Number 2, writing's hard. What was the hardest thing about writing this one?
The world building.
Question 3, what do you enjoy more, writing nonfiction or writing fiction?
I enjoyed writing fiction more because it's a bigger endeavor.
Question 4, what's the worst or best advice that you've ever been given about writing?
The worst advice is write what you know, which I think is just, I don't even know if that's a real bit of advice anymore. The best bit of advice is, actually, it came from Baldacci when I think about it. He goes, the world needs your stories. The world's waiting for your stories. We need it. That's cool. That was inspiring. I was like, that's cool.
And question 5, what did that scotch taste like when you typed the end on the manuscript?
Oh, it was actually a port.
Okay.
And it was a delightful, treacly port. It was good. I think I drank a fair bit of that night.
What a feeling.
But I didn't realize how much editing there was.
You thought it was the end.
Oh, my Lord. That is like...
Just the beginning.
That was so much work. Yeah.
All right. That's the writing quick 5.
Great.
Mark, we're now going to do the Survivor Outrider crossover quick 5. You ready?
Love it.
Question 1. What is harder, getting to day 47 of Survivor or writing a novel?
Oh, mate. Day 47.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question 2. How would JLP go in the world of Outrider?
Oh, he'd be perfect. He'd be perfect. He'd be
maybe he's Jack Dunn.
He could be Jack Dunn. He could be one of the Four Horsemen as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe
pilot.
Maybe he's the crackhead with the wheelbarrow.
The Adelaide supporter, Adelaide Crow supporter.
Question 3. Which character from the book would you want in your Survivor Alliance?
Definitely Dyson, because he'd take the most heat.
That's a good call. Question 4, kind of reverse. Name a survivor that you would want with you in an apocalyptic situation.
Luke Toki.
Why is that?
Highly entertaining, up for anything.
Yeah. And so do you know the game? Question 5 is, do you know F, Marry, Kill? We're going to do a different game. We're going to do the Outrider spin-off.
Yeah.
We're going to do Yard, No Man's Hill. Okay, so which of these 3 players are you sending?
Yes.
Which of these 3 Survivor players are you sending to the Yard, to the No Man's Land, or the Hill? Ready? These are people you've played before with: Sandra, Geordie, and Khan. So who are you sending to the Yard? Who are you sending to No Man's Land?
Geordie straight to the Yard. Sandra, No Man's Land. Khan up to the Hill. Help us cook resistance meals all day.
Love it. Very good. And Sandra, you know she can survive in No Man's Land. She can survive.
The American Eagle.
All right, that was the Survivor Outrider crossover quickfire.
Love it.
Mark, it's been so good to chat. How do people kind of find you and follow you and keep up with your journeys? What's a way that they can kind of like find you?
Mate, best way to find me is Instagram on mark.a.wales. All LinkedIn. I'm on that too for a more formal social media LinkedIn. Yeah. You'll see me on there wearing a tie. No, I don't do that. But what I'm trying to do with the book is it's going to be out at the end of June, 25th of June is the official published date.
Awesome.
It'll have a long pre-order window leading up to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to generate as many pre-orders as I can because that all counts as week 1 sales.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a really strong opening, it's kind of a self-reinforcing cycle. More buyers get the book and so on. So yeah, I'm pushing hard for pre-orders. You can help me by pre-ordering the book, and you can find it in all good booksellers.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mark. It was great to chat with you about your new book, Outrider.
Mate, thank you.